Think about the Taliban back in the late 1990s. You probably picture this group that seemed, well, almost allergic to technology, right?
Definitely. Banning music, TV, photos.
Trying to shut down pretty much any kind of outside information flow.
Uh-huh. But fast forward to today.
And they're all over social media.
Yeah.
Twitter, Telegram, even TikTok. It's quite the contrast.
It is a stunning contrast, absolutely. And understanding that transformation, that's really what we're digging into today. We've been looking through a whole stack of fascinating sources, articles, research reports that track this evolution in their media and information strategy over, well, decades now.
Okay, so our mission here is to really unpack how they've used information, how they've controlled it as a tool for power.
And how that strategy adapted over time through these really distinct eras.
Yeah, and what does it tell us, not just about them, but maybe about power and resistance in this digital age we're in?
Exactly. It's quite a journey, you know? From soldiers literally ripping up cassette tapes in the street.
To fighting hashtag battles online. It's wild.
And the sources lay this out really clearly, kind of phase by phase. So maybe we should start with that first period, when they were first in power, 1996 to 2001.
Okay, this is the era the sources call what, maximum control.
That's the term they use. And it fits.
Feels like an understatement almost, based on what I read. They weren't just like limiting things, they banned photography, TV.
All kinds of entertainment. And then, yeah, by early 2001, the internet gets added to that list too.
Wow. What was the stated reason?
Well, the sources say it was about controlling things they saw as wrong, obscene, immoral, and against Islam. It was ideological.
An attempt to sort of purify the public space.
Yeah.
Including information.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the enforcement was, well, very public, very brutal sometimes.
I read about soldiers ripping up audio and videotapes, literally hanging the strips from fences and poles.
Yeah, and destroying the entire music library at Kabul's radio station right after they took the city in '96, that kind of thing.
And they had the Bell Mare off the moral police, right?
Exactly. They were key. Stopping cars, searching for hidden tapes.
There's that one really disturbing story in the sources about a young guy punished publicly.
Oh, yeah, the one with the VHS tapes. They wrapped the actual videotape around his neck and body, blackened his face.
And paraded him through the streets with a loudspeaker announcing his crime. Just incredible.
Really sends a message, doesn't it? So the media landscape back then was incredibly tight.
Barely any international media, local stuff, under total control. Just state radio pushing propaganda and religion.
And you have to remember, controlling information like that was just so much easier before everyone had a smartphone and internet access.
Right, the whole game changed after 2001.
Completely. The intervention happens, Afghanistan opens up, modernization kicks in.
And crucially, mobile phones and internet access just skyrocketed. What was that stat? By 2016, something like 89% of Afghans had mobile internet.
That's the figure cited, yeah.
Yeah.
Staggering rise. And what's fascinating is, despite banning all this stuff before,
the Taliban didn't shy away from this new digital world, did they?
Not at all. This next phase, the insurgency era from 2001 to 2021, they developed a really sophisticated insurgent media strategy. They embraced the platforms they had banned.
Twitter, Facebook, YouTube.
Telegram, even TikTok later on. It was a major strategic pivot.
So they weren't just dabbling. They were using these platforms for, what, expanding propaganda, recruitment?
All of that. Plus, encrypted apps like WhatsApp, Viber, Telegram became crucial for secure communication, operational security.
Right.
And fundraising, too. Building these virtual communities of supporters online.
And, the sources point out that this decentralized online presence was actually a form of protection.
How so?
Well, unlike their old radio station in Kabul, the Voice of Shariat, which the U.S. bombed in 2001.
Ah, right.
If your presence is spread across countless online accounts and platforms, you're a much harder target to take out physically.
That makes sense. A distributed network is resilient. And their messaging changed too, didn't it? They started positioning themselves differently.
Yeah, very deliberately separating themselves from groups like Al-Qaeda or ISIS. The sources really emphasize this.
How so?
They frame themselves strictly as a nationalist group. Their goal, just establishing an emirate within Afghanistan.
Fighting foreign invaders for self-determination. That was the narrative.
Exactly. It was about building their own legitimacy while undermining the Afghan governments.
And the content reflected that? What kind of stuff were they putting out?
Well, research shows the most common theme in their videos was military competence, showing off victories.
Projecting strength.
Right. But also public relations stuff, engaging with locals, interviewing people after operations, amplifying grievances,
Hmm.
like civilian casualties from airstrikes.
Ah, okay. Like that example of the video claiming they captured government weapons and fighters?
Precisely. Visual proof of effectiveness, and they got really good at this.
Better than the coalition and the Afghan government, apparently.
That's what one source calls the propaganda domain. The Taliban often won because they were just faster. Yeah, they could film, say, the aftermath of a bombing that caused civilian casualties, edit it quickly, and push it out through social media, Telegram, WhatsApp.
Reaching rural areas, especially.
Exactly. So by the time the official channels could even confirm details and respond.
The Taliban's version of events was already out there, shaping how people saw it.
First mover advantage in the information war.
And they were smart about leveraging local culture, too, weren't they? Using mullahs, religious scholars, elders.
Definitely. These figures, amplified online and through informal networks like mosques and madrasas, were key.
Especially during that final push in 2021, convincing Afghan forces to surrender.
Yeah, the sources mentioned religious scholars trying to persuade commanders like Ismail Khan not to fight them. Tapping into shared religious views gave their message huge resonance.
It wasn't just military, it was a socio-cultural campaign, too. Challenging the government, challenging civil society things they opposed.
Like that Mullah Mujibur Rahman stopping a concert or making those really inflammatory statements about decapitating opponents of the emirate.
Yeah, that really highlights the ideological dimension. And then there was the U.S. Taliban deal in February 2020.
The Doha Agreement. The sources frame that as a huge psychological win for the Taliban.
Portrayed as a victory, which seriously demoralized the Afghan forces.
Right. Big factor in the collapse later. And meanwhile, for the outside world.
They were cultivating that Taliban 2.0 image.
Yeah, remember senior officials? Some still wanted terrorists writing op-eds in places like the New York Times.
Incredible, really. So looking back at that whole insurgency period.
They became masters of communication, basically.
Yeah.
Segmented audiences used all sorts of platforms.
Including ones they'd previously banned, and they just out-messaged their opponents. It was a very agile strategy.
Which brings us to now, Phase 3. The return to power since August 2021.
And initially, remember, there was that big PR push right after they took Kabul, trying to seem moderate.
Yeah, reassuring the world, don't worry, we've changed.
That was the public face. But the sources make it pretty clear that behind the scenes, the reality shifted back toward, well, covert information control.
Getting reliable, independent news out of Afghanistan now is incredibly difficult.
National media has been decimated, basically perished, as one source puts it. Channels closed, strict rules, censorship.
Female presenters having to cover their faces, entertainment gone from TV and radio again.
And the risks for journalists who remain immense.
Self-censorship is widespread, but there's also active persecution, imprisonment, torture.
Even foreign journalists facing threats, being told to retract unfavorable stories.
But here's the thing. While they're clamping down hard on traditional media,
they're still super active on social media themselves.
Right. It seems like they're flooding platforms with pro-Taliban accounts, reactivating old ones.
Sharing only positive stuff, being careful not to break platform rules so they don't get kicked off.
It creates this constant online battle, doesn't it? You see activists launch hashtags like #BanTaliban.
And immediately, they're countered by pro-Taliban accounts pushing things like #AfghanSupportTaliban. Often dominating the trends.
They're actively fighting criticism online.
So this current phase feels like a hybrid almost?
Yeah, blending the old 1990s desire for total authoritarian control.
With the sophisticated, competitive online tactics they learned during the insurgency.
They can control traditional media much more easily now they're in power.
But the online world, that's a much tougher space to dominate completely.
And for many Afghans who oppose them, that online space, especially anonymous platforms like Twitter,
that's become the main place left for dissent, for resistance, sometimes the only place.
Which really puts the spotlight on others, doesn't it? Like civil society outside Afghanistan.
The sources suggest they have a role in finding and amplifying those voices being silenced inside the country.
And the social media companies themselves.
Huge responsibility there. The sources stress needing clear, enforced policies on hate speech and extremism.
Monitoring the situation in Afghanistan specifically.
Right, and responding when crackdowns happen. Maybe even coordinating with Afghan activists, possibly through groups like the GIFCT.
Because right now, the Taliban's goal seems to be achieving information dominance while they consolidate power.
Definitely. And, stepping back a bit, The sources also connect this media struggle to broader ideas from academic research.
About how social media works in politics generally, mobilization, legitimacy.
Exactly. Concepts like the participation ladder, how online activity can go from just getting info
To engaging in discussion.
all the way to empowering people to actually influence real-world stuff. That celebration by pro-Taliban supporters online right after the takeover is cited as an example of that e-empowering stage.
Fascinating. Online clicks translating to real power, though it cuts both ways.
Oh, absolutely. The sources acknowledge the dark side too. Social media facilitating radicalization, spreading disinformation.
And all this is happening against that backdrop of really deep, long-standing problems in Afghanistan that existed way before 2021.
Pervasive corruption, that timber example from Kunar province really sticks out.
Yeah. Plus, nepotism. Officials not being held accountable, a weak central government historically, issues with foreign aid.
So the sources suggest that for civil society to effectively push back against corruption and demand accountability non-violently.
They need more than just will. They need organization, knowledge, maybe external support.
Right. They mention youth efforts, the need for education and nonviolent struggle, maybe even framing it within Islamic tradition to make it resonate locally.
And the role of political elites is key too, either fueling division or promoting reconciliation.
It's telling that the current Taliban government immediately banned all political parties.
Doesn't exactly scream reconciliation.
Yeah.
And then there's the idea of the social contract.
Which the sources basically say is lost, or in a vacuum right now. Rebuilding any legitimate governance means creating a new one.
And the sources are clear. Women have to be included in that process.
Critically important. And related to that is the quality of government services.
How well the government actually delivers for its people matters for stability, right?
Yeah.
The idea of a soft state.
Exactly. A state that's dysfunctional, riddled with corruption, unable to meet basic needs that breeds conflict. So understanding all these underlying
The
factors,
state itself, leadership, individual factors like education, connections, tolerance.
that's key to grasping both how the Taliban managed their comeback and where future challenges to their rule might come from.
Okay, so let's bring this back to you, the listener. You came here wanting to get a handle on this complex situation, maybe quickly but thoroughly.
And hopefully seeing this detailed evolution from the tech bans to the digital mastery, and now this hybrid control, and connecting it to these deeper issues.
Like governance, corruption, the struggle for participation.
Hopefully that helps you see beyond just the headlines. It reveals these layers of power, control, the battle over narrative.
And the ongoing fight for people just to have a voice in Afghanistan.
It really drives home how controlling information isn't just, a tactic. It's fundamental to consolidating power and shaping reality, both back then and definitely now.
Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Given how effectively, how adaptively the Taliban has used media and information control over all this time, how much will the future of dissent, of resistance, maybe even any chance for broader participation in Afghanistan, how much will that depend not just on what happens physically on the ground?
But on what happens in that digital space. It's a powerful question and a reminder of how much narratives and information shape politics everywhere, not just in Afghanistan.